thought maybe I said it. I didn't mean to. And I was like, wait a minute, what just happened?
Creepy.
Yeah.
Is your job search stuck? Maybe you're not getting any interviews with employers. Or maybe you are, but no job offers. Or you may be new and not even know where to start. This is Charles Max Wood, and I'm releasing a new course ebook on how to find a job as a software developer. The course walks you through the process of finding the types of companies you want to work for, getting their attention, and putting your best foot forward as the candidate they want. I've coached dozens of developers in looking for jobs and have been able to help several people find jobs within 2 weeks to 2 months. So whether you're new to development, can't find a great job that fits what you want, or looking for remote work from an area without a strong tech community, I can help. Go to getacoderjob.com and sign up today. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Angular. This week on our panel we have Joe Eames.
Hello.
Aaron Frost.
Hello.
Alyssa Nicoll.
Hello.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. Hello. We have two special guests as well. We have Brian Love.
Hello.
And Kevin
Schuchard.
Schuchard.
That's it.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Why is he so disproportionately better at you with British accents?
I don't know, man. I guess I haven't spent enough time over there.
Yeah, we'll have to get you back over there. I hear there's a big conference over there every year.
Would love to go to Angular Connect.
Yeah.
Be awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, we have you guys on the docket to talk about Angular Schematics.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is something I've been wanting to dig into for a while. Do you want to just give us kind of the elevator pitch for Schematics to get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. So Schematics is basically a library that is kind of coming out of Angular and the Angular core team. And it's a library for creating and modifying files in a file system. So it's written in TypeScript, and it's leveraged by the CLI for commands that you're probably running today as an Angular developer, like ng-generate, ng-update, ng-add, right? And so underneath the hood, the CLI is using Schematics to perform all of the manipulations to your file system and to existing files, so that way you can easily generate out components and these kinds of things.
Well, do our users need to be on a certain version of Angular for using these schematics?
That's a really good question. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so the functionality that you're hoping for is going to be determined on the version of the CLI you're on. So some of the functionality has evolved over time with the CLI. So, for example, things like CLI prompts,
Right?
Those were introduced with version 7 of the CLI. So depending on what you're expecting is going to determine which version of the CLI you'll need to be, your application will need to be running, or globally that you have installed as well.
Yep.
So I feel really bad. I dove right in to the juicy good stuff. And we didn't even get to your intros on like, who are you? So do you guys want to go ahead and do
so excited
that?
about schematics. You just
I know, right?
I can introduce myself. My name is Brian Love. I am the Chief Technology Officer for BrieBug. We are a Angular consulting firm here in Denver, Colorado. And we work with a lot of big clients here in Denver and what we call the Front Range. So we work with a lot of large enterprises that are building big Angular apps. And we help them solve some of the problems that they're kind of running into. We guide them in best practices. And we also offer staff augmentation and these kinds of things as well.
So you kind of come alongside the developers and help them out?
Yeah, that's right, Alyssa. Yeah, so I kind of oversee all of our engineers and all of our project leaders, kind of based on what client or what project we're working on, help them out architecturally. And then I also, do a lot of development myself. So I'm pretty full-time in development as well as kind of leading projects and overseeing the engineers. So I get to live and breathe it every day. So
nice. Sounds like you're crazy busy.
Yes. Yep, that would be correct.
Crazy and busy.
Yep.
Crazy busy.
There's a pause between those two.
Yeah.
Commas are important.
Yeah. They save lives.
Is Kevin at BrieBug as well?
Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Kevin Schuchard, senior developer at BrieBug, and been here for a few years and work on a variety of projects, like Brian said, big and small. And then recently, I've had the opportunity to write a few schematics for BrieBug that are open source and a couple on my own. So excited to be here talking about schematics today.
That is awesome. I want to interrupt real quick and ask, are you like super proud to say senior developer? Anytime I hear someone say that, I'm just like a little jealous. I'm like, God, that must feel so good to say, because I'm still in the mid range. I'm going to be honest. So are you just like, have like a little sheriff badge or something of like pride with that?
Give them a pin. So when we bring them into clients, it's a nice, flashy, shiny pin.
Brian, he pronounced the whole meaning of CTO. He's pretty pumped about that too, though, right?
Dude, well, last time I was a panelist, you were like, "What's CTO mean?" So I was like, "Well, let me make it real clear here. What exactly we're talking about?"
That's true. I gave you crap both ways, didn't I? My bad.
Yeah.
All right, disappearing back into the bushes.
Yeah, I don't think you get real excited until you have letters.
Oh
in your name.
yeah,
Words.
oh
Skip the
yeah.
letters.
But yeah, don't let Kevin kind of shy you away. He's seriously, I couldn't pump him up enough. Great guy to work with, and super smart and talented. And he's been doing a lot with schematics, and we both have kind of been playing with it a lot over the last couple of months. And we're just seeing, honestly, the power of what we're able to get out of schematics. And we're like, hey, this is a really cool thing. And we'd love to not just share this, internally with our engineers and with our clients, but kind of take this out into the community. I spoke up in Portland on schematics. I've done a bunch here in Denver and Boulder. And we just kind of want to get people familiar with schematics. And honestly, if you're listening to this, you're not going to walk away from this podcast and you're not going to be able to like hit the ground running with schematics. But our goal is really to inspire Angular developers to start their journey with schematics and to kind of peel back the lid and take a look at schematics and the CLI and the power that's there and that's available to them. So
it gets a little trippy though, right? Like there's a bit of a barrier entry to getting going. Is that true?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, there is. One of the features that the schematics offer is that it gives you access to the abstract syntax tree, or the AST, from TypeScript. And so I think that can be probably one of the big hurdles with getting going with schematics, is you need to understand, first of all, what that is, and then second of all, like how to read it, how to pull data from it, how to make decisions off of it, make updates, deletes, creations.
How do you explain what AST is then? Like, do you have a simple definition, or is it not easy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so AST, for our listeners, that's an abstract syntax tree. And it's basically, if you open up a TypeScript file in VS Code, like you parse that with your brain, right? And you're like reading it, and there's functions, and there's like open brackets, close brackets, all this kind of identifiers and syntax, right? Well, an AST is basically the computer version of your brain reading that code, right? So it parses the code and it comes up with this tree that kind of describes exactly what's going on inside the code, right? So you can really drill down and get within, certain identifiers, whether that's like an if statement or whatever it is, right? So think about something that the CLI does. When you generate out a component, it finds the nearest module, right, to your component that you're generating, to that path. And then once it finds that module, it determines where the declarations array is, right? And it can add your component at the end of that array and do that, very deterministically and say, okay, this is exactly where it needs to go. And it knows that because it's looking at the AST and determining where that is in the file. Does that make sense? Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's basically it's what all of the code is turned into, or not. Is that a horrible way too simple?
Yeah, that's not really a good way of saying it. I think it's what the language looks like parsed to a computer. It's not what it looks like to a human. I mean, to humans, it looks like what we see, but in order for a computer to follow it,
okay,
it follows the AST. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No, I just was going to say there's a cool tool that if anyone's sitting here listening to this podcast and saying, hey, what is the AST? There's an online tool called the AST Explorer.
Yep.
And you can just go type some JavaScript in there and it'll spit out an AST. So you can just like go console.log hello world and it'll spit out for you an AST where you can see, okay, here's a function call. The argument was a string that said hello world, and you can kind of see or you can paste a whole Angular component into the AST Explorer
Right.
and kind of see what an AST looks like. And so there's some, but it is a little bit of a bit to wrap your mind around, like Kevin said.
And so I think I get what AST is now, but the relationship again to schematics was that schematics use AST to know what to do kind of thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think that's right. So imagine like you were going to write the schematics in order to inject, a component that you're generating into that declarations array, right? You could probably do that without an AST using like maybe some regex or these kinds of things, right? But I think that using a regex or kind of string manipulation, if you will, is a little brittle, right? We're using an AST is very systematic and very programmatic, and we can determine exactly where we want to put this based on the AST. And we can get the exact location in that file where we're going to inject, this string of whatever that component is.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking, let's say we're trying to find the import statement for a file. And, if you go the string matching route, you have to have all these cases like, is this being used in a comment? Is this a variable name?
It's a really good example.
All these different, you have all these scenarios where an AST, you can break it down by, is it a declaration? Is it a comment? Is the comment before or after this line? Is this a variable? You can get that detailed exact type information of the code that you're working with and know precisely that this is an import statement, and not only an import statement, but the statement I'm looking for.
And then you can take that once you found it, and you can modify the tree to put new things in or take old things out. And then you return a new AST, and the CLI outputs the file the way that you provided the new AST, if that makes sense. So if you wanted to put a new thing in an array, you update the AST to have another thing in the array, and then you give the new AST back, and the CLI did that for you, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the relationship to AST and schematics.
Yep. You can also get that position, and you can also deal with strings as well. So then you can read the entire file into the schematic. Using the AST, you can find exactly at what position you want to insert your text, and then you can just string concat in your text there as well. So you can kind of do it both ways.
So is it pretty easy to get access, I'm assuming, to this AST? Or is it like you have to include this whole other library?
No, so it's actually just TypeScript, right? So, and again, maybe just to back up, Kevin and I have definitely done a lot with schematics, but we are not the developers of schematics, and I would not claim to be like the expert on schematics. We just want to kind of share our knowledge here, just to be like super clear. But my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Kevin, is that's something that comes with TypeScript. So you can use the TypeScript. It's not the TSC compiler, but it's basically TypeScript, and you can get an AST back from a TypeScript, file. Basically, read the file and hand it off to this TypeScript, which will then return back your AST. And you can play with that as well, without getting into schematics or anything. If you're interested in ASTs, check out that astexplorer.net, and there's a whole bunch of different AST parsers. Would you call them a parser? I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, they are parsers. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so you can actually paste in your Angular, component or whatever it is, select TypeScript from the dropdown, and then you can see the entire AST that comes out of TypeScript.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to finish answering Alyssa's question. So when you get in the code and you're making a schematic, the CLI just takes care of creating the AST and giving it to you. So it's not like, hey, Alyssa, you have to know how to make an AST in order to do schematics.
Oh, that's a good point. Sure.
Yeah, they did. You just get an AST, and then you can modify it or return it the exact same way you got it, or but it's not like, let's get level 300 and build ASTs based off of code. You know what I'm saying?
No way.
So it's a lot simpler than maybe what we made it sound like. You just show up with your Hello World schematic and you get an AST, and then you can start buggering with it. So to answer the question fully, that's it.
And that's a really good point for anybody listening. Like, you don't have to know all about ASTs and everything to get into this. And that this is kind of the complicated side of schematics, right? You can build schematics without getting into ASTs. And we could talk a little bit about that if you want.
So that was with the regex or string manipulation. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, kind of. So there's actually this entire, I don't know if we want to call it a feature, but alongside with kind of modifying existing files, and especially modifying existing TypeScript files is where you're going to deal with the AST side of things. But if you're actually generating out new files, as you can imagine, you're not going to want to muck with AST or anything like regex or whatever, right? Because you basically want to have templates. So if I'm building like a custom component generator schematic for whatever reason my organization needs, if I'm building that, like I don't want to have to write all this code in order to do that. So what they've done is it's pretty easy to actually generate out files using schematics, right? So there's this directory files underneath your schematic, and in there you can put templates and template of files like a spec file, a TypeScript file, a SAS file, CSS or whatever it is, an HTML template, and then you can use kind of a specific templating language that the schematic uses in order to easily build out and kind of stamp out, if you will, generated files from your schematic.
So I just kind of pull back the camera a little bit off the schematics and just go one more level on AST. AST is not like a new thing. It's like an old thing. It's been around for a long time. And I'll give you an example. Facebook built this tool called JS Code Shift.
Code Shift, yeah.
Yeah, they call them code mods. When you write a script that runs through JS Code Shift, they call them code mods at Facebook. And a few years ago, I was in Angular.js and I realized that the app would turn on a lot faster and it would take a lot less time to start features if I used inline template strings versus template URL. And so I use JS Code Shift to rewrite every single Angular directive and component to use inline template strings with Webpack versus using template URL. And it just rewrote every single variation we had. And it did it like in a way that was like programmatic. And I knew I wasn't having copy paste errors. So these things have been around for a long time. Angular is just really starting to harness them with the schematics, and the team has been harnessing them for a long time, ever since the CLIs went out. But, opening the schematics API is what allows people to do some cool things like what Brian and Kevin have worked on. I have personally pumped huge one of the schematics that Kevin's built as prettier in Angular projects. So it's not new. It's been around for a while, this AST thing, but it is wicked confusing. So.
Okay, that makes sense. So you said CodeShift is Facebook's label for AST?
No, the AST is a little tough to walk around in and to say, hey, if I finally found my function call, how do I get into the arguments? Like, it can be a little bit tough to see all that. So JS CodeShift is like syntactic sugar on top of the AST that Facebook built to make it real easy. And you can just do a query and say, hey, just give me back a part of the AST that looks like this. And they made it really simple to do queries through the AST and stuff like that. So it just makes you doing AST manipulation, in my opinion, significantly easier. So that's JS CodeShift is just a tool for working with ASTs that Facebook built. It's not what they call ASTs. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And Aaron, do you know if you can use JS CodeShift with schematics? Have you tried that or no?
I haven't tried it, but ever since me and you talked the other day when I was in Denver, I'm just like, you know what? I should try it because I got to imagine that JS CodeShift with the Angular CLI would probably be a pretty sweet combination.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, we could talk to the Angular team about making it work, because it significantly made it easier to work with AST when I worked with it.
Yeah, because otherwise you're doing like some really nasty iterations and recursion to find what you're looking for.
Mm.
Yeah, like a lot of what people spend their time doing, like almost over half, is just finding the part of the AST they want to manipulate. Right. And then they only spend half their time actually writing the code in the schematic they want to do. So it could afford to be improved. And if JS CodeShift worked, it'd be amazing.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for a layer there, like you're saying.
Abstraction of some sort, right?
That sits on top of the schematics. That kind of opens up the API in a way that's understandable and valuable, because, like you said, once you get into updating and manipulating the code, it's that's when you're like, oh, I need to learn what AST is and how to work.
All
with
of a sudden, you're like drowning. You're like, Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You were saying that you don't necessarily need to use AST in order to get into schematics, and talking about template stamping was the main key that I took away from that.
Yep.
Do you have any pointers, and I don't know if you have to back up any further than that, for when people are getting started, like if they're making the decision to like, hey, we're going to need to use AST, or no, not really, we're going this template route, or is there like an even before step?
Yeah, I think, like Brian said, there's kind of two pieces that we've encountered with schematics. There's the adding of new files, and that goes back to the template route where you can, give an arbitrary number of files or folder. You can do an entire folder or nested folders. And then you can decide which pieces of those templates are going to be compiled, either to a variable name that you pass or some other functionality. And that can be inside the file itself, or even in the file name or the directory. So all those things are variables. And if you're just doing that, I think that's a great place to get started. And it's relatively easy to kind of get your mind around it and get a working example going. When it comes to modifying or updating an existing application or file system, that's when you're going to kind of start bumping into the AST and the way in which you need to work with it, dealing with finding the element, like Aaron was saying, and then understanding where it is, its position, like those things come from the AST. And so when it comes to adding files, that's actually, pretty straightforward.
Pretty
and simple,
easy. Yeah.
I'd say, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
And once you get that, I think it'll kind of click. You're like, oh, this is easy. I can make a lot of files with relatively low effort. If you want to make, system-wide updates, depending on the update, that's when you're going to get into the specific cases of working with AST and understanding how those updates differ and what you need to do.
Yep.
So yeah, one thing that I'm kind of looking at as far as schematics go, I mean, sometimes it's JavaScript. I mean, most of the time it is JavaScript or TypeScript. But you did mention that you can actually just drop strings in. So if I have something that's not JavaScript or TypeScript, maybe it's JSON or YAML or some other config file or things like that, you can also create files with that stuff in it, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And actually, like, manipulating those files tend to be a lot easier than manipulating perhaps like code or JavaScript or TypeScript. For example, let's say you want to write a schematic, or as part of your schematic, you're going to update or bump the version of something in package JSON, right? Mm-hmm. So that actually is fairly trivial. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Kevin, but basically you just parse it, you modify that object, you mutate the object, you stringify it, and you write it, and you're done. It's 4 lines or whatever that is. And as that's something that certainly as web developers, we're used to using, like, JSON and these kinds of things. But when you actually get into, again, kind of modifying, the source code, whether that's TypeScript or JavaScript, that's where you start getting into the AST and some more complex scenarios.
So how does it represent the file system then? I read this article that you put into the Google Doc that we sent you, and it talked about representing the file system as a tree, which is not an AST as far as I understand.
Okay, so yeah, for the tree, when working with schematics, they're generally structured very similar. So you'll eventually, as most examples, you'll be returning a function, and that function is passed 2 arguments. The first one is the tree, which is sometimes also called the host. And the second argument is the context for the schematic. So you'll generally be working with the tree most of the time. And the Angular team, when working on the schematics, they provided quite a few helpful methods that allow you to, like we were talking earlier, that makes it relatively easy to work with the AST. And so those will be things like read, visit methods. There'll be update. There's a recorder for recording modifications to the file system. So by the time your code hits this point when working with the tree, you're making these modifications or updates to the TypeScript AST, which is generally referred to as the tree. And so another benefit is that you can chain lots of methods together. You can return asynchronous changes to the tree. Sorry. So the tree changes can return observable. And you can compile up all these changes, whether that's 1 or 1,000. And if, let's say on step 12, something blows up, maybe, unexpectedly, you don't have to have any logic in your schematic that rolls back all those changes. And so it processes all this in memory, and gives us kind of the benefit of like maybe a SQL transaction where you can
roll the whole thing back.
And you don't have to do anything. It's just going to do this for you automatically. But it's just a nice benefit of working with an AST and having this run in memory. And the way that the Angular team has architected this is that if anything goes wrong at any point in time, the schematic will just fail. And you can catch that and provide errors, but you don't have to have any logic that kind of undoes all of the previous changes you've made to a potential file system.
And you can actually play with that yourself, right? I mean, think about the dry run flag, right? If I do ngg component or whatever I'm doing, and I do, -- dry run, it'll output and say, oh, I created these files or whatever it is, but it actually doesn't commit that to the file system. Again, to Kevin's point, it's kind of running, this tree is kind of in a virtual kind of context and that it's executing in. Yeah. And it's not until you actually commit all those changes that it actually writes out all the changes to the file system, well, whether that's adding files, removing files or updating files.
Makes sense to me.
Cool. Yeah, that's a pretty cool fail-safe to make it so that we don't have any disasters like 99% of the way, and then just strand you because you didn't get the last 1%.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
that would make it impossible.
It would make it really tough, right? Because then it would also leave as a user of this schematic, it would leave you in a bad state, right? Obviously you're using Git or something like that, and you can deal with that, but you don't want to have that poor experience to the user. So that's one of the really nice features about schematics. If you were to maybe compare schematics with maybe some of the other alternatives out there, maybe that's like Yeoman or something like that. So it's kind of a differentiator, if you will.
So Yeoman is a replacement for schematics? I didn't know that, but I guess I've never used Yeoman. So
yeah, I think it's an alternative.
Yeah, it's a lightweight alternative.
It's a lightweight alternative. I think that's, Aaron, I think you're on it. Or was that Aaron or Joe? But yeah, I think it's a lightweight alternative.
If it made sense, it was me. But not Joe. No, it doesn't do everything that the schematic system is trying to do, Yeoman. So,
need to create a complex enterprise Angular application? Angular Bootcamp is an intensive 3-day workshop class to learn the basics of Angular through sophisticated techniques for real-world applications. We target Angular 6 and the recent versions, with much of the curriculum is suitable back to Angular 2. Or go beyond the 3-day class with a consultation or project launch with Oasis Digital, the team behind Angular Bootcamp. We can assist your team or launch your project with advanced Angular topics including scalability, data flow, state management, full stack product design, and more. Contact us for a private class at your location or buy a ticket for public classes in various cities around the U.S. and occasionally in Europe. Online live instructor training is also available at angularbootcamp.com.
So how do you write a schematic then? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chuck. So maybe just to back up a second on that, the first thing that you want to do when getting started with schematics is you're actually going to install an additional CLI. So not the Angular CLI, there's a schematic CLI as well. And I believe, is that part of the Angular dev kit? I believe you can find it online. You're basically going to NPM or yarn install this schematic CLI. And then using the schematic CLI, you can create a blank project. And it's kind of like the equivalent of ng-new, right? So you do schematics, blank, and then you give it a name. And that'll create a blank project for you to kind of get started with. So it'll create things like the package.json. It'll create a source directory with your index.js file or index.ts file. That's kind of your entry file. There's also a file called collection.json that kind of defines all of the schematics in your collection. So the first thing you're going to want to do when if you're going to get started building a schematics is to actually install the schematic CLI and then generate out that blank project.
So it's like a schematic.
It's like a schematic. Exactly.
It's freaking meta, bro.
Yeah, dude. And real quick, while we're talking about that schematic CLI, there's also another really helpful feature in the schematic CLI. You can actually generate out a sample project that they have as part of the schematics CLI. So that instead of doing schematics blank, and this is kind of what you're getting at, Frosty. It's the command is literally schematic, and that'll create a demo project, which has a lot of really good like code that you can kind of study and see how they're doing things. I think there's 4 schematics in that collection that it generates out. And each one kind of builds on the other one. And you can use that as a way to learn schematics as well. So it's kind of a fun little sandbox kind of playground for you to kind of get started in as well.
So who built that? That's pretty cool.
Well, that's part of the schematic CLI. Yep. So I imagine Hans built that as well.
So I know that, Kevin, I know you did something the other day to give me like a sandbox for my schematics. What's your thing that you built the other day?
Yeah, so it's similar. It is a schematic, and then I've taken a lot of the things that we've learned building schematics here at BrieBug and then on my own to set you up with kind of a starter project. And so it starts with a blank project. And then what I discovered, or I guess I can back up, the problem I initially ran into was when I run this schematic, I ran into the issue of like, okay, how am I going to test this? How am I going to see how it's translating from the schematic code to, on my file system? Because at the end of the day, these are making changes to our application. And so I was running up in the issue of how do I visually see what's going on? Like like a lot of people, I'm a visual learner. I want to, test and assess and see what's happening. So what I did was alongside the schematic code as a sibling, created a folder, called it Sandbox. And then I basically ran ng new inside that Sandbox folder just to have a blank Angular application. And then that along with some Yarn or NPM scripts, I set it up in a way that I can build the schematic, reset the
Git repo,
the sandbox to its checked in state, yep, and then execute the schematic against that sandbox. So I'm building it locally and then running it locally. And by version controlling that sandbox, it's very easy for me to pull up my editor and see a Git diff of the changes that were made or done or added or whatever the schematic does.
And one of the nice pieces about that is the linking, right? Using NPM link. So that way you can link in your schematic source into that project and actually run the schematic using the Angular CLI, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So the Sandbox app, essentially you run either Yarn or NPM link, back up a directory into your source code. And then when I'm executing this locally, I'm actually running, ng generate and then my actual local schematic name. And it's through the magic of linking, it's executing that exact same source code in that directory.
So it makes it easier so I don't have to like change one line, redeploy to NPM just to test my crap. Like you're using NPM link. Okay. So you're just taking some lessons learned and you're being like, hey, this is how Kevin says you should do it. And I've hit my head on the wall a couple times for you, and here's some lessons for free.
Yes, yeah, I packaged up all those difficult testing scenarios and found something that works. And it's a pretty nice developer experience to be able to test really quickly and see the changes. And again, it's nothing. There's no magic. I'm not doing anything that anyone hasn't done before, but I've kind of just put these practices together in a repository and made it a pretty pleasant experience for testing and developing schematics.
Is it called Schemagic?
Ooh, I like that.
Oh my!
Dog.
That's good. That's good.
You said it's not magic.
I've heard that. I think it's yours.
That's an NGConf talk title right there.
Schemagic.
Oh my!
Magic.
It will be after this talk.
I'm going to Google Domains right now. And they plug this
Get on it. See if you could beat me.
Go down,
Faster than me.
So what I'm wondering is, so let's say that I get in, I build this schematic out, or maybe Frosty does it right, because Frosty's a huge fan of Groovy and Grails. And so he built a Grails app schematic, right? And he wants to share it with all of his friends at Hero Devs. So how does he
all
do
my
that?
60-year-old buddies that use Groovy?
That's right.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with 6-year-old people use Groovy, for the record.
What is Groovy? Is this a code thing?
It's a language. It runs on the JVM. Anyway, so how do you share it, right? Or maybe you have some component that you've built that you have a schematic that loads it up and configures it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways to share that schematic, and it probably depends on, your organization or kind of what you're doing with it. If you're a library author, let's say, Angular Firebase or something, your schematic is going to be kind of part of that project, right? And you'll define that with that collection.json file that I mentioned. So I think that's kind of one way that you would share it. Certainly another way is that you would publish it to the NPM repository. So you would, publish that out as something that somebody can publicly install, like Kevin's done with his Prettier schematic. And then another way that you might share it is, internally to an organization. And you could do that either through just using a Git repository and pointing that as a dependency in your package.json, or having some sort of internal repository server like Artifactory or something like that. So pretty much any other way that you would publish a package to make it consumable by other people. So it kind of depends on which avenue is best for you or your organization and that kind of thing.
I hate those answers.
I guess for mass publishing though, can I just put it in an NPM package and then include it somehow in the CLI? I guess that's my question.
No, so there's actually a problem. Like, I think Chuck's wanted to know, Brian, discoverability.
Yeah, that's something we were just talking about yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because right now, like discovering, like let's say, Kevin's made this really awesome schematic for Prettier, but how do you know about it, right? And right now, there's kind of only one avenue to learn about those schematics that are available, and that's using the Angular console that the Norwal folks have put together. And you can submit a PR against the Angular console source code, and you can add your schematic into that. I think they call it extensions, I believe is the tab or the button in the console. And then you could go into the Angular console, click on add or remove CLI extensions, and then there's a schematic that you can then install and add.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm just going to touch on Kevin's schematic for Prettier. I think it's my favorite of all the schematics. I've literally pumped that schematic. I don't know if I've ever pumped a library as hard as Kevin's schematic. Straight up. I've spoken about it on like 3 continents. Like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one. One of the other ones, I guess to kind of toot our horn here, one of the other ones that we've built and published, as a BrieBug team is our Jest schematics. So we're big fans of using Jest over Karma to do unit testing for our clients and for our large Angular applications that we're building. And so we've got a schematic out there that you can just ng-add Jest, right? And that'll basically swap out Karma with Jest and wire up everything for you. So then you can just run npm test or yarn test, and it'll use Jest instead of Karma to run all of your tests. So that's a pretty cool one as well to check out. And I mean, while we're talking about, other schematics, I think, a handful of the libraries certainly have schematics. Obviously, we've seen Material demo their schematics on stage at ngconf, and those are very cool and getting better. And then there's also schematics by libraries like Ionic and NativeScript as well. Is there another one too?
NGRX.
And then NGRX, that's right, yep. So the NGRX team also has schematics. And then Norwal, they have their schematics as well. So there's definitely a bunch of them out there that are really valuable, but it's still kind of hard to discover and find them.
So one schematic that's really important is there's these update schematics where library authors can provide an upgrade script from one version of their library to another. And like the Angular team in the CLI, they've built in support to like get those discovered in your project. So like the project I was on a few months ago, I needed to upgrade from Angular 5 to 6. So I ran ng update, and the CLI was like, hey, these 2 libraries you have upgrade schematics that you need to run. And so I was able to just say ng update these ones as well. And then those things ran their update script. So there's actually a lot of support for schematics, even in the form of updates, because that's where a lot of the schematics become really handy. Like one is scaffolding out new things, but the other one is the ability to update someone from one thing to another, or from one version of the library to another, is another really powerful story for schematics. So those exist as well. Like, and one of the libraries I was working with was Clarity by the VMware team. And yeah, like they had some breaking changes. So they made a schematic to fix it all for me. And then I just ran it, and the upgrade, even with the breaking changes, was really easy to deal with.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yep.
All right. Well, anything else we should jump on with schematics then? So do you just, if you want to include it, you talked about doing an NPM link if it's one you're working on, but if it's something that somebody else is using, do you just NPM install it, just have it in your package JSON, and then it's just there?
Yeah, right now there's two different ways to go about that. And the typical way that you would install any other package, you would run npm install the package name, add it as a dependency. You could do this globally as well, and then you can run ng generate, for example, and run that package. The other way you can add and execute a package is with the ng add command. And that's going to kind of do two steps for you. It's going to both install it and save it as a dependency of the application. And then it's going to run the schematic that is tied to the ng add key. And so in that, Brian mentioned a collection.json earlier. That's where you can define all of the schematics in your collection or in your schematic package name. You can have multiple schematics to run by name. And one of those you can specify as ng-add. And so that way, when you run the ng-add command, it will both add it as a dependency and execute the schematic associated with that script.
Gotcha. Is there a way to test your schematics? Like if you build one?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Chuck. And so there's actually, I think, a blog article. I don't know if Hans wrote it or who did, but it's on the angular.io blog. And they talk about testing schematics. And so kind of similar to how we've got like the test bed and things kind of wired up for us as Angular developers to test our components, schematics also have a schematic test runner. That allows us to kind of point the schematic test runner at that collection.json file and kind of tell it what collection we're going to run, and then specifically which schematic we want to run or test. And then we can run that, and then we can assert against that, using, I think it's just Jasmine, I believe. And we can assert things against that and ensure that our schematic is doing what we want it to do, whether that's creating files or, specific modifications to files and all this kind of thing. So you can certainly build a robust, unit test suite behind your schematic to verify that everything is working well, as you're developing that and as you continue to, come out with new versions and these kinds of things. So there's a pretty nice testing framework that comes along with schematics as well.
Awesome.
So one thing we didn't do, I think would be really helpful. We've talked about schematics. We've talked about AST. We've talked about the process for developing them. I think what's going to get people into making more, because there's so many smart people out there that are like, I don't understand schematics. And so they're not going to dig in yet. What are some of the things you could do with schematics? Like, and I want you to just go like hypothetically, what are some of the stuff you could do with schematics just to get people thinking about it so that they might in a few weeks be like, oh, a schematic could solve that. And then they start getting into schematics. Like, what are some of the powerful things you could do? Like just throw out some harebrained ideas real quick.
Certainly, automating your job to a certain extent, there's something that you're doing over and over and over again, that's a red flag. Hey, I can build a schematic around this and automate this. I think you can enforce architectural principles in an organization with schematics. If there's a particular style or a particular pattern that you want to enforce or kind of guide your developers towards, schematics is a great thing for that as well. And then another one, I'm going to let Kevin kind of talk about this as well, is maybe you want to build kind of like a seed project. Maybe you're a large organization and you've got some Angular apps built and you want to kind of have like a seed project, which is maybe perhaps kind of common for some organizations, where you want everybody to kind of build off of this seed project. You could certainly build that in a GitHub repo or a Git repo or whatever, and somebody could clone it out and do whatever they need to do, or fork it or whatever. But you could build a schematic around this. And this is actually something that Kevin's been involved in, and I'll let him speak to a little bit.
Yeah, the client I'm working with right now, they're a large organization. They have several front-end apps, and they're due to various restrictions, they can't put all these applications into maybe a single mono repo. Yeah. So they're their plan right now is to do multiple applications. And so their previous path for that has been to clone down one repository for the front end, another for the back end, run some scripts, generate a new application. And with that, the applications have diverged. Some are on different versions and things like that. But since we started working there, I've worked with one of their developers, and over the course of about 1 to 2 weeks, he was able to create a schematic that stamped out their seed project, following all the libraries that they normally use, having the general setup that all their applications will need for things like authentication or logging, various functionality that every application needs. And then with the schematic piece, he was not only able to stamp all that out, but he was able to add in some optional configurations. For example, he was able to extend our Jest schematic so that applications or teams could adopt Jest very easily just by running the schematic. Same thing for Cypress and other functionality. So by switching over to a schematic, they can still very easily stamp out these applications in an approved architecture that they've been using and follows the best practices. And still, if they need to make a change, they just go back to their schematic, make a small adjustment, and then they can provide things like update packages, right? So if a library or a feature changes, they can provide an update schematic within that schematic, and then everyone can adopt that change very easily. But
one of the kind of the neat things I like about this is think about, you're a dev at this organization, you've been tasked with building on a new app. Sure, in the past you could go and fork or clone this repo and kind of that thing, but you don't get any customization, right? What if you don't need that authentication piece, or maybe you need a different authentication? There's kind of some variations on yours. If you were doing this seed project, you'd have to go in and tweak all that stuff manually. But one of the things I think that'd be really cool is, you could, with Angular 7, with the CLI prompts, you could just prompt the user and say, oh, do you want to use this auth, or do you want to use this auth? Using OAuth, or using this custom in-house authentication, or using this logging, or whatever. And it could kind of roll up that application for you and kind of get you off and running. So that way, you're not wasting time deleting files or adding things and these kinds of things. So that's kind of a cool idea that we kind of helped implement with one of our clients, and using schematics in that manner to kind of build out a customized, a really good dev experience, instead of just having a seed project that you just clone and good luck. So those are a couple examples. Yeah. Certainly, library authors are using schematics a lot as well. But I get that a lot of us aren't library authors. So some of these other ways are things that you can use schematics yourself, either as a solo developer or, as part of a team or a larger organization. So
yeah, I'd really like to emphasize the point that Brian made earlier about, keeping yourself dry, not repeating yourself. If you're doing the same thing over and over, that's where a lot of the schematics I've written have come out of. These are tasks that are not inherently difficult, but they still require us to do them
tedious
over and over. They're tedious. Yeah.
And there's prone to error.
Yeah. It's prone.
Right?
Yeah. The larger the changes, the bigger the surface area is for you to make a typo or miss something. And so if you're doing the same thing over and over, you're having to, you got to find that blog post that had the one instruction on how to do it. And you got to make those changes over and over. And you're like, man, I've done this 5 times already. And, now I got to do it next month again. And so
joy.
Yeah. The Jest example is, our Jest schematic is an example of that. And the prettier one, I love, using prettier with Angular, and I've set that up a number of times.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not difficult, but there's some things you have to do specifically with Angular that you don't have to do with other applications, perhaps. And so one night I actually saw the article that Aaron wrote on how to make prettier work with Angular. And so I literally over a weekend took that article and stamped out the prettier schematic that I've written. And I probably account for half the downloads on that package.
You alone?
Yeah, because it's something
it's skewed. Wait, it's like all other surveys and numbers I read online?
Yeah.
No. Every new project I create, I run that schematic. So I don't think it's just you.
Yeah. But I think it's a good example that if you're curious about it, or you're a developer that you're doing something repeatedly, a schematic may help you. And, and who knows who it'll help, who out there that you don't know, as people discover it, share it, and use it.
It's a fun way to contribute to the community.
So I think if you've got something that it's a little bit tedious to install for the first time, I think it makes sense to get a schematic for whatever you're doing, whether you're installing Jest for the first time or Prettier, or you're installing,
Cypress, but it's not that
Clarity, or exactly. And you like Cypress, and you want to have it scaffold out the the Cypress config and everything. Like anyone who's doing that kind of a library thing, or you're a big proponent of it, if there's not a schematic, make a schematic and own that for the community. Brian said if there's a lot of repeatable things, like you're doing the same thing over and over, like you're creating reducer files and effects files and stuff, start using a schematic or create a schematic to do that thing for you.
Yep.
If you're in a large organization with like 300 projects, it's worth it to make a schematic to start upgrading all your projects so that they don't all get like stagnated. Like, does that make sense? And to start helping people automatically rev versions of their libraries. Like if you're using Lodash the wrong way and you can make a schematic to help your organization use Lodash the right way, then make a schematic for that. But
I was going to say refactorings, but yeah.
Yeah, refactorings is huge. That's, modifying files with refactorings, that's where I've gotten huge amounts of benefit off of working with AST. And so, if you have some pattern that you think people should be using, make a schematic to help people get over to your your way of thinking. So there's really quite a bit of things that you could do with schematics. And I'm only pointing all this out so that people start thinking about, hey, what could I use a schematic for?
Yeah, that's a great point.
All right. Well, we're about an hour in. Is there anything else that we need to cover? I just don't want to leave anything off if it's important or, people are going to really miss it.
I feel like we've done a good job.
Yeah, I think we've done a good job kind of introducing schematics. Hopefully people will kind of listen to this and say, hey, this is cool. Let me go out there, kind of learn about it and read about it. Certainly the blog post on the angular.io website is a good place to start. There's a lot of other great resources, and we've provided some resources as well that we'll put in the show notes, kind of get you started, linking to the Sandbox project that Kevin wrote and some example schematics that we've written and these kinds of things. So we'd love to kind of throw out those resources and get people started, because I think there's a lot of value for the community if people would get involved in schematics, and it would be just kind of a win-win, something that you can use for yourself and your organization, and then you can share it out with the world and let other people, use that and contribute to it and those kinds of things.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do some picks.
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Joe, do you have some picks for us?
Absolutely. So for my first pick, I absolutely want to pick Brian Love because he bought that darn Star Wars picture that I wanted so bad.
It's legit.
Brian and I were hanging out into an art shop with some amazing Star Wars art. Brian, he put down the money and bought that amazing Star Wars art, and it's so cool. And you absolutely should tweet out that picture again, just so that people can go out and check it out and see how cool it is.
I will. It's very cool. My wife is a huge Star Wars fan, so it wasn't just for me. So I got some brownie points on that one.
Nice. So, yeah, that's my first pick. My second pick is going to be the schematics that BrieBug has put out, right? Like Kevin and Brian, you guys' work has been awesome. The prettier and the Just schematics specifically, loving those. So just great work for contributing to the open source community at large and the Angular community. That's pretty freaking awesome. And then my final pick, I know we've already mentioned this before, but ngconf is releasing the big talks in short form versions. They're like 3 minutes long on YouTube. It's called ngconf minified. And so whole talks are being cut down to about 3 minutes. So you can check them out, get an idea of whether or not you want to watch the whole talk, or if out of 3 minutes you can get enough. But it's a way for people who just don't have time to spend 16 straight hours watching talks, can actually get the gist of what a given talk was about. So I'm really excited about it. Put out 2 a week, and we'll be doing this for the foreseeable future at least. And that's my final pick.
Awesome. You should look into putting those on Alexa briefings. Just throwing it out there.
That would be
Alexa
awesome.
briefings?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Why do you guys know what that is, but I don't?
I don't know what that is either.
So essentially what you can
Oh my
do.
gosh, do you hear Alexa in my background? I said Alexa.
I have it in my office too, and it didn't come on, but so you can tell the Amazon Echo to play your briefing in the morning, and you can add skills that give you a different briefing. So if you're into particular brand of politics, or if you want news on the local area or weather or things like that, you can add all those things to your briefing. And so ngconf could create an ngconf skill and add an ngconf briefing to your briefing. And then, each day when you got your briefing, it would play the 3 minutes of the talk.
That's cool.
I love it. Brian, did you just search for angularbriefing.com?
I did. I did not.
I thought I heard keyboard. I figured that's what was going on.
Brian, the first step is admitting you have a problem.
You caught me, man. You caught me. Shoot.
All right, Aaron, what are your picks?
All right. I'm going to pick, first pick. This is serious pick. I'm going to pick ice fishing. You fish on the ice. I'm picking it. I've done it since I was a kid and I love it. Second pick, smoking trout you caught on the ice. I've been doing it. And if anyone wants to try the best, most amazing fish in the world, well, in Utah, come to my house because after I go ice fishing, that's what happens.
That was like a huge jump
And,
in the world to in Utah. Like,
well, I didn't want to offend the listeners, so I reduced the scope a little bit. I pulled back. I inherited too many scopes, so I pulled back. So, and then the last pick is just going to be Joe Eames as the dungeon master for D&D. Dude's fantastic. If you're ever in Utah and you've got like an extra 4 hours, try and schedule some D&D time with Joe because he makes it a lot of fun for the players. Those are my picks.
Nice. I'm going to jump in here with some picks. The first one, and I picked this on pretty much all the shows this week. We did a challenge on Entreprogrammers. You can go watch or listen to us talk, entreprogrammers.com. It's essentially a mastermind group, so we just talk about business and stuff. Anyway, we did a challenge where we would all do 8 Pomodoros before noon every day. And the first 3 days of the week are typically my recording days. So I've been getting up at 4 a.m. to get them done. Wow. And anyway, it's been really awesome. Actually, I've gotten a ton done this week, and I'm probably going to keep doing it. Maybe not getting up at 4 a.m. But
is a Pomodoro like a burpee? Why are you doing that?
So Pomodoro technique is 25 minutes of focused work. So you basically turn off all your distractions, make sure that people aren't going to interrupt you. And then
I think Pomodoro means tomato.
Tomato in Italian.
The original guy who created this used
tomato.
a tomato. Oh. The original guy who created it used a tomato timer to do his 25 minutes, I think. So
yep.
I have severe ADHD, and I have actually used that technique quite a bit, and I will back you up on that one, Chuck. It's awesome.
I don't want to do some Arnie Palmies, dude, where you do 25 minutes and then take a shot, an Army Pomodoro.
I think this would be counterproductive eventually.
Yeah. Anyway, so I've been using
an Arnold Pomodoro, bro.
I can go to Google Domains real quick.
So anyway, I've been using Kanban Flow to plan out my week, and then I've just been using the Pomodoro timer that's in Kanban Flow to track my time.
Cool.
And it's been really, really great. John Sonmez has a YouTube video where he basically says, this is how I plan out my week, and he uses Kanban Flow, and that's basically the process I've been following. But yeah, it's been terrific. I've gotten a ton of stuff done this week. I'm pretty tired getting up at 4 a.m., but it's been working. So yeah, so that's my pick. Kevin, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, my first pick is going to be actually Angular Material. So the client I'm working with right now, they make lots of external and internal apps, but the application I'm using, they've decided to go with Material. And so I've had free range of kind of choice of components and a little bit of design input. And I've just gone all in with Material, and it has been such a treat. That is such a complete library that I've accomplished so much in a short amount of time that it's just been a joy to work with, and it integrates with Angular so well. So definitely check out Angular Material if you haven't. And my second pick is going to be just open source projects in general. So with these latest ones with schematics, it's just been really fun and rewarding to make a schematic that other people can, get a benefit from as well. And so I encourage everyone to think of a project, either big or small, to put it out there for the community and see if you can provide some value and help people out.
Nice. And Brian, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, I got 2 picks for you. I don't know if everybody's seen on Twitter this last week, but it looks like Angular team posted out that we've got over 1.5 million visits now to angular.io. I think that's in a 30-day time span. So I think that's a huge deal. I think so my pick is kind of the community and thanking everybody. Certainly ngconf and the videos that ngconf produces have been just instrumental to me learning. And then part of that, definitely want a big shout out to Jesse Sanders, our CEO, who nominated me to be a GDE and has really kind of helped mentor me in Angular over the last several months and year. So definitely a huge thank you to the Angular community, to the panelists here on this call, and to everybody that's out there just putting out great stuff that we can all learn from and become better developers on. And then my second pick is we're putting on a pretty cool event here in Denver. I know this is kind of local, but on January 17th, we're doing what we're calling an evening of Angular. And Joe and Aaron, you guys know about this, right? Because you guys have come out and spoken at our evening of Angular events. So pretty cool, pretty fun. We rent out an entire movie theater. We have food, and you can get drinks if you want or whatever. And then we invite out a whole bunch of speakers to kind of bring the entire Angular community together here in Denver in the Front Range to learn from people and to meet people and get to spend time with people that, maybe they can't get out to ngconf or whatever it is. And so we're bringing in some really amazing speakers like Bonnie Brennan, Sam's coming out. We got Brandon Roberts and Mike on NGRX. We've got Kim Maeda, I think is how you say your last name. And then Lucas as well, Lucas Rubelke. So very pumped about that. Looking forward to that event. And if you're listening and you're in the Colorado area, it's definitely something that you don't want to miss. And we don't make any money off of this. We actually donate all of the profit to a local nonprofit that helps. We've done mostly like kids in technology lately. So it's a great event. It's a lot of fun, great opportunity to learn and meet people and for a good cause. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, they brought me out for one too. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, Chuck. I forgot.
No, it's all good. I'm just kind of saying if you get a chance to go because it's a ton of fun.
And I would totally encourage like other communities and areas to do it. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty cool. You just plug an HDMI cable into your laptop and you're projecting on this massive screen behind you. And it's a really great way to just kind of hang out and little more social, but also fun and a great way to learn. So,
yep. Very cool.
Chuck, can I throw in one more pick?
Go for it.
All right. This is a pick that it's important for the Angular community. I think there's NPM.js is doing a survey right now, and they're asking a lot of questions about, your use with NPM and also just your general use of JavaScript. And I'm not sure how active the Angular community gets in these polls, but there's several metrics that say, Angular is getting a lot bigger. But then there was the State of JS that said, which was an actual poll unrelated to really any tool system, and they're saying Angular is getting smaller. And so I just wanted to encourage everyone, head out to npmjs.org and take their survey and, talk about, if you don't like Angular, say that, but the Angular community needs to start taking these polls a little bit more seriously. So that's my last pick, is the NPM.js JavaScript survey.
Awesome. All right. Well, I have one more question, and that is for both of you. How do people find you online?
Yeah, cool. Go ahead, Kevin.
Probably best way is Twitter, and I'll put my my handle in the show notes, but it's just my full name, Kevin Schuchard. And I also have a website, kevinschuchard.com. But that's where I'm most active, is Twitter and my blog.
Cool. And then you can find me on Twitter as well. I'm Brian_Love. So that's Brian with an I. So you can follow me, and I tweet a lot about Angular and JavaScript and related technologies. And then I also blog on brianflove.com, my personal website. So definitely check it out.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you both for coming and talking through this with us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Well, we will wrap this one up, and we will be back next week.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.